My name is Natalie Harding. I'm 34 years old, and until that summer afternoon, I thought I understood the difference between a difficult family and a dangerous one. I was wrong. They took my 6-year-old daughter to the playground and left her there. My mother said, "It'll toughen her up." She said it while wiping barbecue sauce from her fingers with a napkin, like she was talking about overcooked ribs, not my child. Like Isla was a lesson plan. Like abandoning a little girl in a public park was some old-fashioned family value I was too soft to understand. I didn't yell. That was the part everyone later found so strange. I didn't scream across the backyard. I didn't flip the folding table or throw a plate against the fence. I didn't even cry. I made one quiet call. And within hours, my mother and sister were handed eviction notices. But that wasn't the end of it. The next morning, at exactly 6 a.m., they knocked on my door with suitcases in their hands, acting like my home was their emergency shelter. And when I opened the door, I nearly blacked out from the shock of what my mother said next. The day before, my mother Evelyn and my older sister Jenna had walked back into my cousin Jake's backyard, carrying paper plates like nothing had happened. People were gathered around the grill, laughing at something my uncle had said. Country music played from a speaker balanced on top of a cooler. Someone's toddler was running barefoot through the grass. Smoke from the barbecue drifted into the warm afternoon air. It should have been just another family cookout. Except my daughter was missing. "Where's Isla?" I asked. My mother didn't even look guilty. "We left her at the playground," she said. "It'll toughen her up." For a second, the whole yard seemed to tilt. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for her to laugh and say Isla was behind the garage with the other kids. Waiting for any proof that my own mother had not just said what I thought she said. But Evelyn Harding was not joking. Jenna gave a lazy shrug and reached for a soda. Kids these days are too fragile. She needs to learn she won't always be included. My boyfriend Liam was inside helping bring out drinks. No one else around us seemed to understand that my entire world had just dropped out from under me. "My daughter is 6, I said. My mother sighed, annoyed, like I was embarrassing her. "Natalie, don't start." "Where exactly did you leave her?" "At the park near Maple," Jenna said. "She knows the one." I looked around the yard, expecting someone to react. Someone to say, "Wait, you left a child alone?" But everyone kept moving around us in that strange family way, pretending not to hear the ugly thing happening right in front of them. That was when I understood something cold and permanent. They hadn't made a mistake. They had made a choice. I stepped away from them, pulled out my phone, and called their landlord. I didn't give a dramatic speech. I didn't beg him to understand. I simply told him that the tenants in Unit 2C had deliberately abandoned a 6-year-old child alone at a playground because they didn't think she belonged in their family. There was a pause. Then he said, "I'll take care of it." I hung up. Liam came out just as I reached the patio door. One look at my face, and his expression changed. "Isla?" he asked. "At the playground." The color drained from his face. We didn't say goodbye to anyone. We got in the car and drove. The playground was only 10 minutes away, but every traffic light felt like punishment. Liam kept whispering Isla's name under his breath, like a prayer. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. When we pulled up, I saw her. My baby was sitting on a swing, her little feet dragging through the mulch. She wasn't crying. Somehow that made it worse. She was just still, quiet, waiting. Liam was out of the car first. Isla looked up at us, and for a moment, she didn't move. Then she stood and walked over slowly, like she wasn't sure whether she had done something wrong. I knelt in front of her. "Baby, what happened?" She looked past me at the empty playground. "Grandma said I don't have a place in the family," she whispered. "Aunt Jenna said I should go find where I belong." My heart shattered so violently, I thought I might stop breathing. But I didn't scream. Not in front of Isla. I picked her up, held her close, and carried her to the car. Liam wrapped his jacket around her, even though it was warm outside. On the drive home, Isla leaned against the window and said nothing. That silence followed us into the house. We gave her ice cream. We turned on her favorite movie. Liam sat beside her, rubbing small circles on her back until she fell asleep with her head in his lap. That night, after we carried her to bed, I sat awake in the dark. I thought about every comment I had excused, every holiday where my mother sighed when Liam walked into the room, every time she said real families knew where they came from, Every time Jenna joked that Isla was too sensitive or too attached. I had told myself they were ignorant. I had told myself they were bitter. I had told myself they would never hurt a child. At 8:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. The landlord had served the eviction notice. Fast. Clean. Final. Liam looked at me from across the room. I showed him the message. He didn't smile. Neither did I. I only walked over, kissed the top of his head, and whispered, "Lesson learned." But the story wasn't over. At 6 o'clock the next morning, someone knocked on the door. When I opened it, my mother, Jenna, and Jenna's boyfriend Mark were standing on my porch with duffel bags and suitcases. My mother gave me a practiced smile. "We'll be staying here for a while," she said. Behind her, Jenna looked bored. Mark leaned against the railing like he already owned the place. I stepped outside just enough to block the doorway. "No," I said. My mother blinked. "Excuse me? You are not staying here." Jenna pulled off her sunglasses, even though the sun was barely up. "Are you serious? You left my daughter alone in a public park," I said. "You don't belong in this house." My mother's face hardened. "Oh, don't be dramatic. She was never in danger. It was broad daylight." "You don't get to decide what danger is," I said. "And you don't get to say her name in this house anymore." Jenna scoffed. "This is Liam talking, isn't it? He's gotten in your head. Ever since you started playing house with him, you act like you're better than us." That was the moment everything inside me went quiet. I stepped back into the house. Liam was standing behind me, silent, holding a cup of coffee he hadn't taken a single sip from. I closed the door. Then I locked it. They knocked for 10 minutes. Then they cursed. Then they sat on my front steps until my neighbor came outside and asked if there was a problem. Only then did they leave. Isla woke up a little before 8. She didn't mention them once. She only asked if pancakes were ready and if she could wear her yellow shirt. That crushed me more than anything, because somewhere inside her 6-year-old heart, she had already started filing away the truth. People who claimed to love her had left her behind. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A long text from Jenna. She said I was cruel. She said they were only trying to help. She said family should support family. Then she asked for $3,000 for a deposit on a new place. I didn't respond. 2 hours later, my mother left a voicemail saying they were staying with a friend, for now. But maybe it was time we all moved on from that little misunderstanding. I saved the voicemail. Then I turned off notifications from both of them. Liam and I didn't need to discuss it. Some betrayals don't need explanation. Some doors, once closed, should stay locked. But I knew my mother. And deep down, I knew silence from her was never peace. It was preparation. A week passed without a word from them. Too quiet. That was the first thing Liam said one night while we cleaned up dinner. Isla was coloring at the kitchen table, humming softly to herself while drawing a crooked purple cat with wings. "They're planning something," he said. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to believe the eviction had humbled them, that maybe reality had finally caught up with Evelyn and Jenna Harding. But deep down, I knew my family better than that. My mother didn't let things go. She rewrote them. The silence broke on a Thursday morning. I was halfway through my second coffee when an email notification popped up on my phone. At first glance, I assumed it was spam. The subject line read, "Housing Dispute Mediation Request." Then I saw my mother's name, and Jenna's. I opened it slowly. The email came from a law office I'd never heard of. According to the message, Evelyn and Jenna believed they had been unfairly denied residence in what they described as a family-owned home. I read that sentence 3 times. My house was in my name, only my name. I bought it 2 years earlier after nearly killing myself with overtime shifts and freelance design work. No inheritance, no family money, no shared ownership. Nothing. But apparently, because I had once allowed my mother to stay with me during a rough patch after her second divorce, they believed they had established residency expectations. The lawyer requested an amicable discussion regarding temporary housing or financial compensation for relocation hardship. I stared at the screen in disbelief. "They're trying to shake you down," Liam said quietly after reading it. Not even angrily. Just tired. That was somehow worse. I called my lawyer that afternoon. He laughed once when I explained the situation, then quickly apologized. They don't have legal ground, he assured me. But people like this rarely care whether they can win. Sometimes they just want to exhaust you. That word stuck with me.
Exhaust.
Because that was exactly what they were doing. Every text, every voicemail, every manipulative little stunt. It all pulled energy away from Isla, away from Liam, away from the life we were trying to protect. That night, after Isla fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with Liam while rain tapped softly against the windows. "I have an idea," I said. He immediately frowned. "That usually means trouble. I can end this." "You can't end people like your mother." "I can create distance." He leaned back in the chair, studying me carefully. I explained the plan anyway.
A loan agreement.
$15,000. Strict terms. No contact except repayment updates. No visits, no family gatherings, no surprise appearances, no legal claims. Missed payments would trigger penalties and liens on any future assets they acquired. Everything airtight. Liam hated it immediately. "You're paying them to disappear." "I'm paying for peace." They don't know how to give that. Maybe he was right. But I was tired. Tired of jumping every time my phone buzzed. Tired of Isla asking why Grandma didn't love her anymore. Tired of wondering when my mother would escalate next. So I had my lawyer draft the contract. And I emailed it over without a single extra sentence. 2 days later, Jenna called. Her voice was suddenly warm, sugary, almost playful. "We really appreciate this gesture, Nat," she said. "See? I knew we could move forward like adults." Move forward. As if they hadn't abandoned my child on a playground. As if we were discussing a scheduling conflict instead of emotional cruelty. "I'll meet you at the lawyer's office," I told her. "Public place. Neutral ground." There was a pause. Then, "Still paranoid, huh?" I hung up. The meeting happened on a Monday morning. My mother arrived dressed like she was attending church. Cream blouse, pearl earrings, soft pink lipstick. The image of wounded dignity. Jenna wore designer sunglasses indoors and spent most of the meeting scrolling through her phone. Mark sat in the corner, chewing gum loudly enough to make my eye twitch. My lawyer reviewed every page carefully. No contact. No claims. No exceptions. My mother signed first. Without hesitation. That should have scared me more than it did. Jenna signed next, then slid the paperwork back across the table with a dramatic sigh. "Honestly," she muttered, "this whole thing is embarrassing." I looked at her. "You left a 6-year-old alone for 2 hours." She rolled her eyes. "There you go again." That sentence settled into my bones like ice. There you go again. As if protecting my daughter was some exhausting personality flaw. The wire transfer cleared before noon. I watched them walk out of the office clutching the money like they had won something. But what they didn't realize was this. They had traded access for cash. And for the first time in my life, I let them. For a while, it almost worked. The calls stopped. The texts stopped. No more surprise visits. No more dramatic voicemails. The quiet felt strange at first, like walking through a house after a storm. You keep waiting to hear another crash. But then, the whispers started. At first, they came through relatives pretending to check in. An uncle asked if I was under a lot of stress lately. A cousin messaged Liam saying family conflict can make people irrational. One aunt called me out of nowhere and said, "I know your heart is in the right place, sweetheart, but abandoning your mother financially at her age?" I nearly laughed. Financially abandoning her. After wiring $15,000. That was when I realized Evelyn had started her next campaign.
Control of the narrative.
My mother wasn't telling people she abandoned Isla. She was telling them I evicted her. She told relatives Liam had manipulated me against my own blood, that I had forced my mother into signing humiliating legal papers, that I valued money more than family. Funny how she left out the playground. That part didn't fit her version of events. They reinvented themselves almost overnight. Jenna got a receptionist job at a dental office, the same office where she once dated the dentist, which probably explained how she got hired so fast. My mother started working at a boutique downtown and posted inspirational quotes online every morning. Starting over is strength. Some betrayals reveal your true purpose. God rebuilds what family destroys. Meanwhile, Mark got a job at a used car lot and suddenly started dressing like a man, trying very hard to look successful. They were building characters.
Victims. Survivors. Fighters.
And people were buying it. The first time I saw the damage firsthand was at my cousin Rachel's baby shower. Liam and I arrived holding Isla's hands between us. She wore a yellow dress with little strawberries on it and carried a stuffed rabbit everywhere that month because she'd suddenly become terrified of sleeping alone. The second we walked into the backyard, conversations shifted. Not stopped.
Shifted.
Those tiny glances people think you don't notice. Jenna stood across the patio, whispering to another cousin, while my mother smiled faintly over a paper cup of punch. One relative barely acknowledged Liam. Another gave me that soft, sympathetic expression people reserve for unstable women in true crime documentaries. "You holding up okay?" one cousin asked carefully. That tone. The one people use when they already believe something terrible about you. Liam squeezed my hand once, grounding me, saving me from exploding. We stayed less than an hour. That night, Isla climbed into bed beside me and whispered, "Grandma still mad at us?" I froze. Children always know more than adults think they do. "She made a bad choice," I said carefully. "Because of me?" The question shattered me. Liam answered before I could. "No, sweetheart," he said gently from the doorway. "Never because of you." Isla nodded slowly, but she didn't fully believe it. I could see that. And that was the moment I stopped caring about appearances. Because gossip was one thing. But once their lies started reaching my daughter, that became war. 3 months passed. Not one payment toward the loan. Not even $10. But online, they acted thriving. My mother posted smiling selfies at the boutique. Jenna appeared on some tiny local podcast talking about recovering from toxic family dynamics. I couldn't believe the audacity. Then one evening, Isla came home from school quieter than usual. After dinner, while pushing peas around her plate, she finally asked, "Did we make Grandma poor?" The room went completely silent. "She said that?" Liam asked carefully. "A girl at school did." I looked at my daughter's face. 6 years old. Already carrying adult shame that should never have touched her life. I stood slowly, walked to the garage, and pulled out the folder containing the signed agreement. When I placed it on the kitchen table, Liam looked at it for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Do it," he said quietly. The next morning, I called Jenna. The second I mentioned repayment, she burst out laughing. Not nervous laughter. Mocking laughter. "You're seriously suing your own mother?" she asked. "Natalie, that's insane." "You signed a legal contract." "Oh my God, listen to yourself." $15,000, I said calmly. "One payment. That's all it takes." Her voice hardened instantly. "You're pathetic." Then she hung up. Sunday evening, just after sunset, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, all 3 of them stood there smiling. Like they had rehearsed this. My mother wore dark red lipstick. Jenna held her phone loosely at her side, like she was ready to record. Mark stood behind them, with his hands in his pockets. Evelyn handed me a stained cardboard box. "We've decided to repay you," she said sweetly. Then they turned and walked away before I could answer. I didn't open the box immediately. Liam came into the hallway carrying laundry and stopped beside me. "What is it?" I stared at the box. "A performance," I said quietly. Later that night, after Isla fell asleep, we opened it together at the kitchen table. Inside was $37 in crumpled bills. An old family photo from 2003. And a cheap plastic trophy duct-taped to a half-empty container of glitter slime. A sticky note attached to the frame read, "In case you forget who you really are." I stared at the box for a very long time. At first, I felt nothing. Then slowly, something colder settled into place. Certainty. This had never been about money. It had always been about power. And they thought I would flinch. They were wrong. The next morning, I called my lawyer. And this time, I told him to proceed with everything. The lawsuit officially began on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, my mother had already turned it into theater. According to 3 separate relatives, Evelyn Harding cried during a church prayer circle and claimed her own daughter was trying to financially destroy her out of spite. Jenna posted vague quotes online about surviving narcissistic abuse. Mark started commenting under family members' Facebook posts about evil people hiding behind lawyers. None of them mentioned Isla. Not once. That was always the most revealing part. A 6-year-old child had been abandoned at a playground for 2 hours, and somehow they had still managed to make themselves the victims. I stopped trying to understand it. Some people don't rewrite reality because they're confused. They rewrite it because the truth threatens who they believe they are. Still, I underestimated how far they were willing to go. 2 days after the lawsuit filing, my cousin Daniel called me late at night. He sounded nervous. "Nat," he said carefully, "I think you should know something." Immediately, my stomach dropped. "What?" There was a pause. "Your mom's telling people she's coming to Isla's birthday party." I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was insane. She said, "What?" "She's been calling relatives saying you secretly invited her," he explained. "She told everyone you wanted it to be a surprise for Liam." A surprise? I rubbed my forehead slowly. Of course. My mother never entered situations directly anymore. She arrived wrapped in emotional confusion, so everyone else would question reality first. "She wants an audience," Liam said after I told him. We were sitting at the kitchen table while Isla colored nearby. She had no idea her birthday party was becoming a battlefield. "She wants witnesses," he continued. "If we react badly, she becomes the victim again." He was right. That was the game. Always. They weren't showing up for Isla. They were showing up for themselves. So, we adapted.
Quietly. Quickly.
We changed the venue entirely. Instead of hosting the party at the park like originally planned, we booked a private room at a children's activity center across town under Liam's last name. We confirmed every guest personally through phone calls instead of digital invitations. The staff received a printed guest list along with one clear instruction: no uninvited guests. No exceptions. The morning of the party, I still woke up anxious. Trauma does that. Even when you prepare for disaster, your body keeps waiting for it anyway. But then, Isla came running into the bedroom wearing her pajamas backward, carrying her stuffed rabbit, smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Birthday girl!" she shouted. And just like that, the fear loosened slightly. The party ended up perfect. Absolutely perfect. There was a giant inflatable obstacle course, kids screaming with laughter, pink cupcakes with crooked frosting flowers. Liam helped organize a treasure hunt while I painted tiny stars on children's faces. At one point, Isla climbed onto a chair, holding her toy vet kit, and announced she was going to become a doctor for nervous cats. Everyone laughed. But I cried quietly in the bathroom 10 minutes later. Because for the first time in months, she looked fully happy again. No fear. No confusion. No sadness hiding behind her eyes. Just childhood. Exactly what she deserved. When the party ended, Isla fell asleep in the car, clutching new coloring books against her chest. Liam carried her inside while I checked the mailbox. That's when I saw the envelope. Large. Manila. No stamp. No return address. Hand-delivered. Immediately, I knew it was from my mother. I waited until Isla was asleep before opening it. Inside was a handwritten letter in Evelyn's unmistakable cursive. The beginning almost sounded normal. She wrote about missing her granddaughter, about family wounds, about prayer and forgiveness. Then the tone shifted. "You don't know what you've done. There are things you don't understand about this family. Things I protected you from for years." I felt cold reading it. Not angry. Cold. Attached to the letter was an old photograph. Me at 16 years old, standing beside a car outside the house I grew up in. At first, the image didn't mean anything. Then I noticed the date written on the back. Same year my father temporarily disappeared for almost 3 months after what my mother had called a business problem. Below the date, she had written one sentence. "Ask your father what happened that night. If he'll tell you." I stared at the photo for a very long time. Liam sat beside me silently. "What does it mean?" he finally asked. "I don't know." But deep down, I felt something shifting. This conflict had never really been about money. Or even Isla. Those things were simply the surface. There was something older underneath all of it. Something buried and rotten that my mother had spent years protecting like a poisonous family heirloom. That realization sat heavily in the house afterward. The next few weeks became strangely quiet again. Too quiet. No more public posts from Jenna. No more indirect comments from relatives. No more dramatic voicemails. The lawsuit moved forward because they ignored every deadline to respond. It almost felt like they had vanished. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Harding?" a man asked. "Yes?" "This is Officer Mendez from the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. We're conducting a welfare inquiry related to your mother's last known address." Every muscle in my body tightened. Apparently, someone had anonymously reported that Evelyn and Jenna hadn't been seen in several days. Their rental property had been vacated without notice. Mail was piling up. The landlord hadn't heard from them. Even Mark's car was gone. The officer asked whether I knew where they were. I didn't. And for once, that answer was completely honest. Later that evening, against Liam's advice, I drove to the rental property myself. The building manager recognized me immediately. "You're the daughter, right?" he asked.
I nodded.
He sighed heavily. "They skipped out on rent, left behind a bunch of junk." Then his expression shifted slightly. "There's a box with your name on it." My stomach sank. He brought it out a few minutes later. A medium-sized cardboard box with Natalie written across the side in thick red marker. I almost left it there. I should have. But curiosity is dangerous when it comes to family secrets. I took it home. Liam waited in the garage while I opened it carefully on an old folding table. Inside were random objects at first glance. A cracked coffee mug. An old winter scarf I vaguely remembered from childhood. Printed emails between me and Jenna from years earlier. Then I found the folder. Legal options. Brian. Brian. My father's name. Inside the folder were notes, photocopies, scribbled timelines, and printed screenshots of what looked like financial documents. And at the very bottom sat another photograph. This one showed my mother shaking hands with a man in a dark suit outside some office building. The photo quality was terrible, like it had been printed from an ancient email attachment. But the date hit me immediately. Same year as the first photograph. Same month. There was no note attached this time. Just a flash drive taped to the back. Liam stared at it. "You're not plugging that in tonight," he said immediately. I looked at him. "I have to know." "No," he said firmly. "You want to know. Different thing." Maybe he was right. So I left it untouched on my desk for 2 days. Life almost returned to normal during that time. Almost. Isla started drawing tiny comic books with colored pencils and insisted on reading every storyline out loud at dinner. Liam and I even went for coffee alone one morning while she was at school, something we hadn't done in months. For a few hours, we felt normal again. Just another couple laughing quietly in a cafe while sunlight came through the windows. I almost forgot the flash drive existed. But secrets have gravity. Eventually, they pull everything toward them. On the third night, after Liam and Isla were asleep, I sat alone in my office staring at the drive. The entire house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I plugged it into my laptop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a folder opened automatically. Inside were dozens of files. Scanned documents. Old emails. Audio recordings. And one video file simply labeled, "For Natalie." My hands started shaking before I even clicked it. I almost didn't open the video. For several seconds, I just stared at the screen while the glow from my laptop lit the dark office. Every instinct told me this was the point where things changed permanently. Not escalated. Changed. Behind me, the house was quiet. Liam and Isla were asleep upstairs. The normal sounds of our life, the dishwasher humming faintly, the air conditioner kicking on, the floorboards settling, suddenly felt fragile. Like whatever waited inside that file could poison all of it. Still, I clicked play. At first, the screen stayed black. Then my mother's voice filled the room. "If you're watching this," Evelyn said calmly, "then it means I finally ran out of ways to protect this family." I felt my stomach tighten instantly. The video slowly brightened. My mother sat at a kitchen table I recognized from childhood, though she looked younger, maybe late 40s. Her hair was darker, her expression was exhausted in a way I had never seen growing up. Not angry.
Afraid.
There are things your father never told you, she continued, and there are things I should have told you years ago. I paused the video immediately. My pulse was racing. For a moment, I considered waking Liam, but some part of me needed to hear it alone first. So I pressed play again. My mother explained that when I was 16, my father, Brian, became involved in a financial scheme with a business partner. At first, according to her, it was supposed to be temporary. Moving money between accounts, hiding losses, delaying taxes. Small illegal things that became larger illegal things. Then, one investor threatened legal action. That was the night referenced in the photo. The car. The disappearance. Everything. According to Evelyn, the man in the second photograph, the stranger shaking her hand, was an attorney hired quietly to help protect my father from criminal charges. But that wasn't the real secret. The real secret came 10 minutes into the recording. There was a deal, my mother said quietly. And I made it. I froze. She admitted she had sold part of my grandfather's land inheritance without telling anyone, in order to help cover the financial settlement that kept my father out of prison. The inheritance that should have eventually gone to me. To Jenna. Gone. Not stolen for luxury. Not wasted.
Sacrificed.
And apparently, my father agreed to let Evelyn take the blame privately within the family if questions ever arose. That explained everything. The bitterness. The control. The obsession with loyalty. My mother had spent almost 20 years believing she destroyed her own future to save the family, while my father quietly rebuilt his reputation and walked away from the scandal untouched. I kept watching. Then came the part that truly broke me. I started resenting weakness after that, Evelyn admitted. I thought survival mattered more than kindness. I thought love meant hardening people before the world could hurt them. Her voice cracked slightly. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing the difference between strength and cruelty. I leaned back slowly in my chair. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry at her. Not completely, because suddenly I could see it. The shape of the damage she carried. Not an excuse, never an excuse, but an origin. Trauma that calcified into poison. Then the video shifted again. Jenna knows some of this, she said. Not all. Mark certainly doesn't. But there's one more thing you need to understand. She looked directly into the camera. The reason I hated Liam wasn't because he changed you. A pause. It was because he made you feel safe enough to stop needing me. That hit harder than anything else in the recording. Not because it justified her behavior. Because it explained it perfectly. My mother didn't know how to love without control. And Liam, patient, calm, emotionally steady Liam, had slowly built a life where I no longer depended on her approval to survive. To someone like Evelyn Harding, that felt like abandonment. The video ended with something I never expected to hear from my mother. An apology. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just tired. I loved Isla, she said quietly. I just didn't know how to love gently anymore. Then the screen went black. I sat there for a very long time afterward. At some point, Liam came downstairs. I hadn't even heard him wake up. He stood in the doorway, watching me carefully. You okay? I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because I honestly didn't know the answer. I think my whole childhood just rearranged itself. He walked over slowly and sat beside me. I showed him the video. All of it. Neither of us spoke for a while afterward. Finally, Liam looked at me and asked the question that mattered most. What are you going to do? I looked upstairs toward Isla's room. That little girl had survived abandonment, gossip, manipulation, and emotional cruelty before she even learned long division. And somehow, she still woke up excited about cartoons and pancakes. Still trusted people. Still loved openly. I realized then that the cycle could stop with me. Not through revenge. Not through winning. Through refusal. Refusal to pass pain downward just because it was passed to me. A week later, my lawyer informed me that the lawsuit had officially defaulted in my favor. Evelyn and Jenna never responded. Legally, I could continue pursuing repayment aggressively. I didn't. Instead, I instructed my lawyer to freeze enforcement unless they contacted us again directly. No more chasing. No more war. I was done building my life around their chaos. A month after that, I finally visited my father. We sat on the back porch of his retirement condo drinking coffee while evening sunlight turned everything gold. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. I handed him the photograph. Then I asked quietly, "What happened that night?" The silence that followed told me everything before he even spoke. And for the first time in my life, he told me the truth. Not all of it. Probably never all of it. But enough. Enough to confirm the story. Enough to explain the guilt he had buried beneath decades of avoidance. At one point, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and whispered, "Your mother became the villain, so I wouldn't have to." That sentence haunted me for weeks, because it was true. But it was also incomplete. Evelyn Harding had sacrificed herself once, then spent 20 years making everyone else pay for it. That was the tragedy of her life. And I refused to let it become the tragedy of mine. Spring arrived quietly after that. Isla lost her first tooth. Liam built flower boxes in the backyard. I started sleeping through the night again. Sometimes relatives still asked questions. Sometimes gossip still circled back around through cousins or social media or awkward conversations at holidays. But the noise felt distant now. Small. One evening, months later, Isla climbed into my lap while Liam grilled burgers outside. "Mommy?" "Yeah, baby?" "Are families supposed to hurt each other?" The question nearly destroyed me. I brushed hair back from her face carefully before answering. "Sometimes people who are hurting hurt other people too," I said softly. "But that doesn't make it okay." She thought about that seriously. Then she asked, "So what makes a real family?" Outside, Liam looked through the kitchen window and smiled at us. And suddenly the answer felt incredibly simple. "The people who make you feel safe," I told her. She nodded, like that made perfect sense. Because to children, sometimes the truth is easiest to understand. We never heard from Evelyn again after that. Not directly. No letters. No lawsuits. No surprise visits. Just silence. But every once in a while, I still think about that video. About the moment my mother admitted she no longer knew how to love gently. And honestly, that might be the saddest thing anyone has ever confessed to me.